Welcome in, MPW Digital Postgame Show. I'm Chase Parham. Going to hang out a little bit here tonight, brought to you by Dead Soxy. I'll get to that in a second. Jeffrey Wright joining us here momentarily. Brian Rippey joining us. And then Neil McCready once he is done with the press conference. Crazy game tonight. Ole Miss knocking off Georgia Tech 48-23. Rebels not just winning, covering as well. I have some background feed. Let me find that, figure out where it is real quick, because I hear myself, which is not good. There we go. Solved it. All right, sorry about that. This will also be up in a podcast form here soon as I get done with it. So if you miss a little bit, you can catch it there as well. All podcasts on MPW Digital brought to you by Twisted Tea. We'll go there in a bit as well. So all that coming up here on the show tonight. Yeah, just crazy game. We'll get into it here in just a second. Before we do that, let me tell you about Dead Soxy, as those good people are the reason we have this here post-game show. Dead Soxy, show you some of the new material we got going on. Some new socks available there from Dead Soxy. You can also see what they've got going on online as well. It's pretty easy. You can do that. Check out the screen for that one and see what's going on. I don't know why that is not working. There we go. Okay. Thanks to Dead Soxy for that. We'll jump back in and get Jeffrey now for the Rebels and the Yellow Jackets. Again, Ole Miss not just winning, but covering as well here today. You know, rushing for 299, hitting some pass plays late as well. A lot of different options here going on for what to start with. Jeffrey, can you hear us? You all good? He'll be with us in just a second. Jeffrey, you've muted yourself, it says. Waiting for that to soften. See if he can hear me. Not really sure what is going on real quick with that. Give me a second here, guys. We'll figure it out. Jeffrey, can you hear me? He is not hearing me at all. Okay. He's not seeing me either. Let's see. Okay, we'll get him back in 1 second. I'm not really sure what is going on there. Yeah, give me a second. Little bit of issue. It's okay. All good. Jeffrey, can you hear me now? We good? Maybe? No? He doesn't even know we're there. So I'm going to knock off him real quick. We'll come back in a second. Know what's going on. Give me 1 minute to figure that out. Can actually just pivot to make sure. We had my computer die last week, and now this as well. So I'm fully up on the potential issues that we have been running through. I'm kind of used to them by now. It's all good. Just give me 1 second. We're just hanging out. Get your drinks. What is the game to watch right now for what's going on? I know Colorado State 14-14. Is that correct still? Is that where we are on that one? Best we can tell. Let's see. I'm gonna pivot. Like I said, pivoting. Give me 1 second. We'll get this rolling. No big deal. No, it's not a sign. It's perfectly okay. We're gonna be all right. I'm not.
Currently unavailable.
It's not a sign. We're gonna get it. We're gonna get it solved. Everybody's hanging. We're gonna get it fixed in 1 second. I was not planning that because it looked like everything was working. I'll have to ask him when we get him on the line what actually was going wrong because I don't personally know. Okay, should be good now. Jeffrey, are you there?
Sorry, I was in the eCam. It said waiting for host.
Yeah, it was telling me. I mean, we're live now. I think we're all good. We'll just do it this way. It's all fine. It was telling me you muted yourself, and then there at the end it said that you were muted. So maybe there's a button. I'll have to ask Neil. Maybe there's something I was missing. First time I've used that, but it's all good. We'll do it this way. No worries. What are we watching right now? Is it Colorado State?
So right now, I have on the Pac-12 networks. It's plural. I have Arizona UTEP because I'm fading the hell out of UTEP. We do have on TV1 Colorado and Colorado State. I'm watching. I think Arizona State is on Quit Watch. Fresno State's up 10-0 on them. That game's on FS1. I've got that one on, and then I haven't decided what the additional television will be.
So as I said in the opening, not only does Ole Miss win, they end up covering this football game, rushing for 299, hitting some passes late. Alabama's next week, and on a day of where the SEC was bananas in all ways, you've got no one that necessarily looks amazing. You've got all sorts of parity. You've got all sorts of stuff going on. Simply just get the hell out of here and move on with the week. I mean, what is the main takeaway today?
So I want to ask you a question
Okay.
because I'm curious about this. Are we reading into the second half?
In what way?
So, if I were to make a case, why is Ole Miss a better second half team than it was last year? Because that was obviously a big part of the story for Ole Miss last year. I think this would be my case. I think Jackson Dart is a better football player this year, and I think they upped defensive coordinator. So I think they're able to make defensive adjustments. I also think it's obvious they have more depth in defense. And so if I were to read into what we've seen, and I'm still kind of indecisive on whether or not I would, the case would be I think Dart, the more snaps Dart gets, the better he's going to be. And they've upgraded defensive coordinator, and I think they have more players on defense this year. So I think I can make a case that the reason why they're better in the second half is not just level and quality of opponent. It's that they're a better team.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt about that because you look at this game and several things turned it for Ole Miss. In the first half, Georgia Tech has 3 drives of at least 12 plays. They go 12 plays, they go 13 plays, they go 17 plays. And while they don't score on 2 of those possessions, 2 huge plays by Ole Miss, Xavion Harris blocking the field goal to the opening possession, and then Dejon Anthony potentially making the play of the game. Because if they score there, it cuts it. It's a completely different game because that is a touchdown if Dejon Anthony does not grab that out of his hand and if he does not stop that to turn it over on downs there on 4th down. And when you come out of break and they've had that type of possessions on you, and it's 4 plays, punt, touchdown, 6 plays, punt, touchdown, and you separate right there. No, there's no doubt there was some adjustments. There was no doubt there was some reset, and that's something that Ole Miss has not had in a while. It's a completely different thing. It's something they've done 3 weeks in a row now where they have gotten better out of the locker room. And then, offensively in the second half, they did things as well. I thought that they made some adjustments. They got big-time sparks with Ulysses Bentley. I thought he really had a burst today. We'll get into run game in a minute. But yeah. I thought Bentley had a burst. You did a lot of stuff with Dart there. In both ways, defensively and offensively, they did a lot of things to feel good about the progression of the program as much as simply winning this football game.
Yeah, and just as a development of a football team. You know what I mean? Like, obviously this team has a lot of roster turnover from last year, but the thing that I keep coming back to in the last 2 weeks is these were 2 games that got iffy, and I felt like last year when they got into iffy games, things really turned on them. Like they had the A&M game that was a win. Is that really the only toss-up? Like when the games kind of got iffy, was that really the only game? I'm trying to think if there was another one.
From last year?
I guess you could make the argument Kentucky. You can make the argument Kentucky, but they were playing in front against Kentucky. But yeah, I think you can make the Kentucky argument. But to me, the other thing that's very obvious right now, I understand it's Georgia Tech, and I understand that that's not going to be anywhere. Probably, it's probably going to be of the remaining games on your schedule, probably your 7th toughest opponent, and so I don't want it to be taken as I'm overanalyzing this. But Jackson Dart kind of had the corral game tonight, didn't he?
You just tough it out, you run, you hit some passes. I mean, look, he's done it 2 weeks in a row. I know we said this a little bit on the podcast, but even last week against Tulane, everything was complicated, and he still made it work. He scored enough points. He got down the field. He's always sort of been this guy, but he's taken another step into one hell of a gamer right now.
I also think he's healthier. I think, I don't know, was it the LSU game? There was one game where I noticed last year, he doesn't look right.
Yeah, he got popped late against LSU and definitely lost a step at that point.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's just kind of what it was. And, he only finishes 10 of 18 for 251. But did he make a bad read all night?
He protected the ball. He made the couple big throws late to ice it, to put it away. At least, we can't tell from our vantage point, but it looked like he made a lot of good decisions on RPOs. I mean, no, Dart played a good football game because, look, the score has masked this 2 weeks in a row, but they've been competitive football games that Ole Miss has pulled away from and won, and they're doing so without their top 3 pass catchers. Caden Prieskorn didn't play tonight. He's got a boot on his foot. They say he's going to be back next week for Alabama. We'll see at that point. Trey Harris has been on MCL watch all week. He's had a cast on his leg all week. He didn't dress out tonight. And then Zacharian Franklin dressed but didn't play. So they're without so many weapons, and then Judkins is banged up. I mean, he's using Watkins and Wade in ways that they're not necessarily supposed to be used and still finding ways to move this offense.
No, and I want to give a shout-out to both of them. I thought they stepped up. I mean, we've talked if they have to be your number one guys in SEC play, that's not really the best formula. But tonight, I thought both those guys stepped up, and I thought they made big-time catches. I thought that they were making big plays, and I thought that was a part of the story. I think the other thing to keep in mind, and the thing that I admired about Jackson tonight, when you play a team that is largely air raid based, which is what they were, you go if they're clicking like they were tonight, you go long periods of time without the football, And I think that's usually what you'll see is like a lot of times, quarterbacks, younger players, oftentimes coaches, even on the offensive side of the ball, they'll get impatient. And I never felt like Ole Miss tonight really got impatient. Everything I thought they did made sense, and I never felt like, oh, they're pressing. Like, yeah, they got into some disadvantaged positions, but I never felt like they panicked tonight, and I take a lot of stock in that.
Georgia Tech ran 89 plays. Ole Miss ran 56 plays. Time of possession incredibly one-sided. I mean, it was a deal where you said where you've got to maximize. You can easily get frustrated. Tech's constantly doing things, staying on the field, doing all this whatever. And Ole Miss, they stayed in their game plan. They was pretty efficient. I mean, I get it wasn't perfect, but it's not going to be perfect right now. It just sort of is what it is, and they still are making something out of it.
They're not healthy enough to be perfect. But yeah. I also tip my cap to them. They made it no secret. They were planning on running the ball tonight. Like they said, like this, we got to get our run game going. Like that's our game plan, and we're going to do that. And the fact that they announced like we're going to run the football, and they did so tonight, I think that's also noteworthy.
I mean, I had a friend mention it earlier in the day, and I got thinking about it and said, no, that's the lock of it. I told Neil right before the kickoff, I said, Jackson Dart's going to run for 100 yards tonight. Because they had to use him. They got to use that deal. He gets the 68-yarder. I mean,
I think he had it in the first half, didn't he?
He had it in the first quarter, 6 for 101.
Yeah, I think he cashed that ticket early.
Yeah, 6 for 101 there. And, I mean, I know I mentioned it a second ago. And now, look, ball protection's got to be there. There were a couple times tonight even that I thought he was about to lose that thing. But Bentley has a burst right now that Judkins doesn't have. There is a one-cut kind of burst on Bentley that if he can do that'll play. That was something that looked very much a part of a run game tonight from Ulysses Bentley. He scores a couple times. I think he ends up with 61 yards on 6 carries or something. Pretty good vision there on that counter that he cut back for the touchdown. He looked like an SEC running back tonight.
Yeah, 6 for 61. I mean, that's the other thing. When you look at Ole Miss tonight, when they tried to run the football, like their success rate was very high. I mean, overall on offense, their total success rate was 46% of the time. So that means basically 1 out of every 2 plays they ran worked, and their rushing success rate was 56. So, that was well above average. And again, I don't want it to be misconstrued. I don't think because you can run it on Georgia Tech that means you're going to go into Tuscaloosa next week and run the football. But I'm trying to apply context with, hey, they basically gave us their game plan. They said, this is what we want to work on. This is what we want to do. And that's, to me, like that's okay. That's a baseline for me to judge them on. And I thought they came out and they executed, and I tip my cap because, sometimes when you do stuff like that, like you tell people you're working on stuff, it doesn't work out, and you say, well, it's a work in progress. Well, I thought Ole Miss made great improvements from last week to this week.
The line was better. They were more physical. They didn't have as many breakdowns up front. Running backs were good. No, they stayed with it. Go ahead.
They still have a problem that Pettis he holds on every play.
Yeah. He was flagged for 2 tonight. Is that right?
Yeah, just 2. But he could have been flagged for at least 5 by my count.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it is what it is.
I'm just letting everyone know, like, when he gets flagged for holding in Tuscaloosa, it's not a league order mandate. He holds all the time.
So I want to flip a little because I got plenty of Ole Miss stuff coming up. It's going to be a show for a while. Alabama, what the hell's going on? 17-3 over South Florida today. They have 0 quarterback play. They played Buckner today. They played Simpson today. Milroe didn't play today. But, look, it's a ton of quarterback. It's not only quarterback. I mean, they did nothing against the Bulls.
No, but I guess let's start with this question.
Yep.
Is Milroe their best option?
If those 2 guys are going to throw like that. 10 of 23 for 107.
Well, so to be clear, I wouldn't even consider Buckner. Buckner gives you nothing. Like, Buckner Buckner wouldn't even be a good quarterback in the MAC. Like, he really wouldn't. To me, this becomes a question of, does Simpson give you enough downfield passing that you have to consider it? But I think you have to, like, at least acknowledge Milroe won the job out of summer, and it wasn't an accident. And the more that they were going on tonight, like, I started to realize, like, yeah, they don't have a quarterback, but he might be their best option. Like, this team feels so much like that 2015 team where they couldn't figure out the quarterback. They started with Coker. They benched Coker. Like, to me, like, maybe that's what it is. Like, you start with Milroe, you bench Milroe, you wind up going back to Milroe. You start figuring out what he is, like, how to game plan around him. But let's also be clear. Yeah, that offense has an identity problem, but that defense is still legit.
There's not, though. Here's the deal. That 15 team, as you kind of said, they won with Coker. This team doesn't have anything close to that. No matter what they do, there's not an option that's going to carry them to some 11-win season. It's just not there. I mean,
I agree. I agree, but also, no. I agree in terms of that, but, like, my bigger deal is they don't have a great option. Are they better off just, like, at least Milroe, Milroe does something well. I don't think you can say the same for the other two. Like, Ty Simpson is more potential than anything. Buckner is more familiarity. Like, the idea with Buckner was he gave you a high floor. Well, their floor today apparently was 3 points against South Florida, who I think gave up 50-something to Western Kentucky.
This is, yes. This is one of those where it's the quarterback equivalent, I think, which is agreeing with your point that Milroe's the best guy, of when you want a team to go into halftime and not try to score because you're like, God, no, just do the thing that makes me very, very uncomfortable, or do this or whatever. I think Milroe is the quarterback that will make the most opponents uncomfortable from a fan base standpoint because he can run around and he can do some stuff and you go, shit, we got to at least hold him in some way. I think every fan base would go, oh my God, yes, please God, give me Simpson or Buckner and try to throw the football and beat you this way. I mean, there is something definitely about the way that at least he can operate that freaks out a fan base. He's the only one of the three that has any chance with that.
Forget fan base. If you're Pete Golding, aren't you saying, please God? I guess this is kind of how I would look at it. If I'm Pete Golding, I would say, please God, play Buckner because I know that I can stop Buckner. I'd be a little concerned about Simpson because I do think Simpson would give you a downfield passing aspect, like potentially. He could open up the passing game in a way that would maybe scare you. But the guy that would scare me the most and I'd have to game plan the most for is Milroe. And I acknowledge that I think Milroe is limited and whatnot. But, I mean, I watched every snap of that game today. Like, they don't have a good option.
What is this line tomorrow?
I was talking to your brother about that. So we have no idea. My gut says because the game's in Tuscaloosa, I think they open it around 8 and they see what happens. Does that make sense to you? Because I don't think they want to do 7. Because their limits are not going to be high until Friday. So I think they open it around like 8 to see how the action goes. I don't know. Here's the real question: how do you price Alabama right now? Do you try to price it based on power rating? Do you try to how do you price them right now?
Sure, but it's 2 weeks in a row where they're not even necessarily physical on the offensive line. They don't have a lot of dynamic stuff at wide receiver. The bigger thing to me is what do you even put with totals here? You can't count on them to score points.
Do you just do the standard college?
It's 55, and we'll go from there. Yeah,
and start it at 56 and see where whatever somewhere around 56 and see where it goes.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Quickly, Adam, Mizzou fan in the stream. Yes, I'm a complete idiot. I said that there's a possibility Missouri is the worst team in the SEC. That was blasphemy. I was very, very wrong. I will eat it.
The worst team in the SEC is in on West End in Tennessee in Nashville.
Losing to UNLV tonight.
Did you see how they lost though?
They lost. Well, it turned into a track meet, and then UNLV hit a field goal with like 5 seconds left.
Correct. So UNLV turned it. So Vandy ties it up. With like a minute 20. UNLV turns it over with like 55 seconds left. Vandy plays it out to kick a field goal to essentially win the game. It's a 30-yard field goal. Never even sniffs the uprights. Then UNLV gets the ball back with like 35 seconds left. They run like inside zone. They get like 10 or 11 yards. Then they just kind of like out of nowhere just decide, what the hell, let's just throw it deep up the sideline. And Vandy busted the coverage. And the kid goes for, like 65 yards, steps out of bounds. They kick a field goal with 9 seconds left, and they lose.
Good.
It is in this, as we've talked about on the shows on Thursday, in this world of we don't really know what this SEC is, it's not something that any of us are familiar with, and we're all different ages. It is nice just to get back to the good old-fashioned Vanderbilt finding a way to lose. Like, there's something comforting about that. It's like a nice, soft, warm blankie. It's like, it's at least good to have that. And Tennessee can't win at Florida. Like, it's sometimes it's just nice to go back to the basics.
Did you enjoy that?
I did. I don't know.
Did you enjoy it? Yeah.
Really
Did you have a good time? I thought you probably might have turned that on, a little popcorn, said, you know what? I'm going to have a good time with that. It's going to be all right today. We're good.
Because it's not like Florida was really that good either. Like, it was just something, it was just like, you know what? It's just, in this day and age where nothing makes sense to me, it was just nice to go back to. Tennessee goes to the Swamp, and the next time they'll win in the Swamp will at least be 21-plus years.
So, I'm jumping around because I know you got to go in a minute. LSU.
No, I'm just sitting here watching Colorado State, Colorado. I'm doing nothing, and I'm trying to keep my wife sane, and she's watching. She's furiously watching the baby monitor.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how's that been? You're getting into your first weeks of college football and parenthood at the same time. Are we multitasking well?
Listen, Chase, every week's a new week. It's a learning process. Gotcha. You know what? Here's the great thing. We are committed to the cause. We have, unlike Alabama, we have an offensive identity. Our identity is we do put the football first.
It's fair. I understand. What's on TV2 right now?
TV2 right now is Arizona and UTEP.
Oh, God.
Because I have a decent-sized wager on that bad boy.
Okay. Yeah, I did.
Hey, I'm heading into Sunday with a winning week for the first time this season.
That's big.
I don't need the NFL to save me.
I did, Steven. I checked on Wes and his Twitter account a little while ago. He was blaming some officiating. He was very frustrated with his Vols. He
got after it early. He got after it early because there was like a nondescript play, and he was already talking about 2 blatant misholds. And I was like, God damn, I wish I had that brand.
No,
I just do. Like, that's just a good brand.
Wes was completely on brand tonight because what he did was early on he wasn't worried. He was confident. Even at 7-0 when Florida got up and it was, hey, it's cute and it's whatever and the Gators are spunky. And then you saw the turn. You saw the officials screwing Tennessee a little bit. Hey, Tennessee just makes all these mistakes. And he does like this 5-6 worry scale. And then when he gets up to like 7, 8, 9, 10, what happens is he becomes like sarcastic and negative toward the Vols because it's all getting emotional now. And that's when his own fan base starts hating him. And then it's just mental and they can't win here and it's all hyperbolic and stuff. We got all 5 stages of grief from Wesley and his Twitter today. It was fantastic. Between that and me getting blown up by Mizzou fans for my Missouri takes, I had a pretty nice Saturday in those ways.
You know what was fascinating though about the Tennessee game? I I could totally envision a world where Florida would win that game, but I thought the game was going to be Milton playing kind of like ass. Like, he wasn't great, but he was certainly far from their biggest issue. Like, he made enough throws that I would have thought, like, if you would have given me that stat line, I'd been like, I think they're probably okay. Like, he really wasn't that bad. It was the fact that, like, you know, they go into that place and it's a house of horrors, man. It's like when Ole Miss goes into Auburn. Like, even when Ole Miss has the better team, there's just something about when they go into Auburn, it's just a house of horrors for them.
Did today say more about LSU or Mississippi State?
I think it said more about Mississippi State, right?
They are not. They have no personnel to run their offense. They are not very talented. Their defense is decent at times, but that's about it. It's a very flawed football team.
It reeks to me of a team that has a defensive coordinator for a head coach, and he was going to come in and he was going to change things up. He was going to have an offense that would complement his defense, because their defense was fine, but Chase, every time they got into like a need to have it defensive stop, they just blitzed everybody and they left Neighbors one-on-one, and they don't have anyone that could cover Neighbors one-on-one. And oh my God, he goes off. Now, I do think if you want to say that I'm wrong and it said more about LSU, here's what I think it would have been. LSU had a bad 20 minutes of football in Orlando after a first half in which they could have knocked out Florida State, and they didn't. And maybe we were reminded this team is still immensely talented. I think also they got away from using Perkins hey, let's put him as an inside linebacker. No, screw that. Let's put him on the edge. Let's let him create havoc. And offensively, they started hey, Neighbors, let's get him some one-on-ones. Let's give him a chance to make plays. And then we got a quarterback that's pretty mobile. They kind of got back to an identity. I still think, though, what today said is State is we talk about Alabama having an identity crisis. I think State's got a bigger one.
Assuming Will Rogers stays healthy, does Mike Wright start a game at quarterback this season?
I think he does, right? Because that's the other thing I kept thinking, I kind of feel bad for Will in the sense of I bet Will was talked into staying, and Will probably should have gone. When you bring in a Satterfield disciple, that's not an offense for Will. There's plenty of people in this country that run the air raid. He was better off going somewhere and just running the same system that he's comfortable with. And because he's going to sit there and he's going to take a lot of blame for stuff that I don't really think is his fault. Do I think Will is an elite, going to be a drafted quarterback? No, but that guy can play college football pretty well. And this offense is just such a disaster for him.
I mean, he barely eclipsed 100 yards throwing today. That was it. He was 104, 105, something like that.
And you can tell every time, he's throwing it to where it seems to me he's throwing it to space and there's not a receiver there. So I'm assuming the receiver is screwing up, and it's he's the one that's going to take the blame for it because he's the one taking the snap.
Buy or sell because of where it's on the schedule. Ole Miss is Georgia's hardest game in the regular season.
Ooh. I still think you can make the argument for Tennessee. I think what we saw today, though, is I don't know. I felt all year that this Georgia team has 2010 Alabama vibes. That Alabama team after they won the national title, where they lost 3 games. They lost in South Carolina when Steven Garcia had his blackout game, where he just made every single throw possible. And Alshon Jeffrey had a big day, and Lattimore had a big day. Then they lost at Baton Rouge to LSU, and then they lost on the comeback when Cam went into Tuscaloosa and had that big comeback. The problem is, does Georgia have 3 games like that on their schedule? Those 3 teams were all pretty damn good. Those teams had a lot of NFL talent. Georgia just seems bored because, they went into the half, they got yelled at, they woke up, and then all of a sudden that game is over with. You know the other thing that game got me thinking about? Spencer Sanders has been so unlikable for so long that I think it's going to kind of overshadow the fact that, like, this is his most admirable performance, like, this season has been. Because he's been getting absolutely his teeth kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
They can't block anyone. He's standing in there. He's making big throws. He's making tough plays. And he's actually playing some pretty good quarterback. But it's just like he's been just such a douchebag for so long that it's like you don't even want to give him credit.
No, he's been good. I mean, that's what I kind of work from their standpoint. You went, hey, this is what this looks like right now. What does it look like without him? You know what I mean? That's kind of been my thought. My 100%. Thought the entire time is, hey, if the program's in trouble, it's because at some point they got to replace that cat.
100% agree with you.
I mean,
he's sitting there, he's like hanging in there, hanging tough, and like you would think like Spencer would be kind of making business decisions. Nah, he's hanging in tough. He's waiting to the last second. He's trying to make plays. Like, I don't know. I found myself tipping my cap to him this year.
So, well, first, Colorado State now has scored a touchdown. Can they keep this up for 4 quarters? 21-14 pending PAT.
Colorado's defense is pretty bad. They just haven't really had anyone to force the issue on them. They've gone from Chandler Morris to Jeff Scott. I have no idea who this cat is for Colorado State, but I guarantee you that he's better than both of them. Can they keep this up like for 4 quarters? I don't know, but my thing is like Colorado's defense is not good enough to where you just sit there and go, "Oh, they're going to figure it out."
I'm going to enjoy Oregon beating them next week. I'm going to kind of like set the TV and be ready for that. I don't know, for whatever reason. Like I'm good with Deion winning some games. I need him to lose one though.
Yeah, but don't hang in there. That's going to happen.
Yeah, I know.
I'm grateful that there's in this day in college football where like so many people are like checking out because a lot of things around the country are kind of disgusting them. It is nice to have like a true wrestling character where you are either all Deion or you are an F Deion. Like he is John Cena. It's like, let's go Cena. You know, Cena sucks. Like it is great to have that because, listen, we're all tuning in and watching, and that's good for us.
No, 100%. Yeah, I completely agree. No, it's been great for football. It's great for entertainment. I mean, it's making me be really interested in the game that otherwise I would have zero interest whatsoever. So we'll hit this on Thursday. Give me the one kind of matchup, whatever. What's the Alabama Ole Miss thing? It's sort of the appetizer or a amuse bouche going into the week. What are you looking for?
Can Ole Miss take advantage of a bad offense?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this has to be a situation where like Ole Miss like goes in and puts up 30. But can Ole Miss, like they were talking about it on the broadcast, when's the last time Ole Miss went in with a quarterback advantage? I think we're both clear on that. That was 2015 when Ole Miss went in with Chad Kelly.
100%.
And Alabama went in with Cooper Bateman and Jake Coker. I think the more interesting question is, before that, would you rather have Blake Sims or Bo?
Oh. I think I'd rather have Bo.
I think so too. The argument for Blake would be Blake was not like Milroe. Blake was pretty good with the ball and he had good legs, but I think you're right. Then before that, I think they're right. The last question is like
it's Eli.
When Ole Miss had Eli.
Yeah.
Although who was it in was it Masoli versus John Parker Wilson?
That's what I was trying to think. I was trying to think of like Snead in 08 and who would have been at Bama and then what would have been there in 10.
I think it would have been Masoli versus John Parker Wilson and then Snead versus John Parker Wilson. I think that's what it would have been.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. You staying up for all 4 quarters of this?
Oh, baby.
All right, you're in?
I got Arizona. Arizona's up 7-0. My daughter has stopped screaming for the first time in how many hours? 2.5 hours, okay. It sounds like. So we're good.
All right, enjoyed it. We'll talk Thursday.
Also, my buddy Pat. I did not put any action on the game because I knew the injury report. But my buddy wants everyone to know out there: Ole Miss is 3-0 ATS since Josie has entered the earth.
Oh, little tip for Alabama next week there, Joe.
I'm just saying he is the only person that is 3-0 on that. I am not.
Okay, there you go. Enjoy your night. Appreciate it, bud.
All right, boys.
All right. Jeffrey Wright joining us there on the show. We'll move on to the next in 1 second. Yeah, Colorado State has scored again, 21-14 now for the Rams. We're going to try to get Brian on with that same link because I would definitely like it fixed. I don't know why that screen is there. Let me get rid of that real quick. There we go. Okay, got that out of the way. Would like this fixed before Neil joins us here before too long, so going to give it a shot. If not, it is what it is. I'm admitting it is my fault. It is completely my fault, but you know what? It's okay. We test things in real time. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, 21-14 here, Colorado State. Arkansas losing to BYU today too, from a standpoint of something that I didn't expect. I mean, I did think BYU could give them trouble. I knew with Rocket Sanders out that it was a good possibility of that being a game, but I did not anticipate the situation where Arkansas would actually lose that football game today. That was interesting, telling. I don't know. I mean, call it whatever you want to call it, but that was kind of fascinating for me today in that one. So Colorado gets it back here. Quickly, let me go to a little bit of stats on today. Got these here. Ole Miss totaling 550 yards. Georgia Tech 477. 299, as I mentioned, on the ground there for Ole Miss. 167 for Georgia Tech. Ole Miss throwing for 251, as mentioned. Haynes King ends up throwing for 310 for the Yellow Jackets. But that, really, other than the two busted coverages, there was not a ton that King did through the air. That's not what hurt Ole Miss today. When they got hurt through the air, is because they did things on their own that caused those problems there for Georgia Tech. That was not anything to do with King, in my opinion. Yeah, Dart runs for 136, Bentley for 61, Judkins for 37. Matt Jones gets that very efficient 1 carry, 36 yards, 1 touchdown. Happy for him. That was really cool there for him. Let's see if Brian is jumping on. He said he was, but I don't have it quite yet. So he'll be here in just a second. Ole Miss 1 punt, 41 yards, and then Cade Davis. He misses his first kick of the year, but he knocks in 2 of them, hits his 47-yarder, hits the 45-yarder, and then the other one was blocked there for him at the end of the first half on that drive where Ole Miss did a good job to get into field goal range. Trey Washington, 10 tackles to lead Ole Miss. John Baptiste with 8. Ashim Young with 6. And then still didn't play a ton of plays, but I thought that Perkins played well in some spots, had a couple really big plays there at the same time. I mean, they've still got to get him in the game more. I thought just from an athleticism that they probably would try to play him a little more, get him in there, get him comfortable. But I did think he was impactful a couple times there from that standpoint when he had some opportunities. So there was that at least in as well. Okay, let me give this link to Brian real quick. Give me 1 second. Obviously, don't go anywhere, and I'll get this. He's having a little problem with the link, so let me get that to him real quick. 1 second. What else are you guys watching? Is everybody doing the Colorado State game, or is there something else? I mean, I think this thing, even with me, is going to keep me up as long as Colorado State has a chance to win the game. I mean, if that changes, then I'm done, obviously. But as long as that is even somewhat of a possibility, I think we're going to have that. I mean, Colorado State's got it back still with this 7-point lead. Because Jeffrey's right, the defense over there is not very good. I mean, it's one of those deals where you definitely can give up points. You can play. Okay, Brian is joining us. So again, it's me trying to make sure I know how to get this working. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I might do the same thing where I have him in here and he's not actually working to the best of my knowledge. So give me 1 second to try to figure this out.
No?
Brian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Yes?
Okay, are you talking though? I can't hear you.
I am talking.
Okay, I can't hear Brian. So can you? I mean, you guys can't hear Brian, I assume either, right? Because if so, I'm unaware of something. I don't know why this has been catching and being weird. I'm not really sure what's going on because everything looks good on my end.
That is weird. Let me try again.
Yeah, he hung up, so I don't know what's happened. Could y'all hear him? Was it just me? Oh, if y'all can hear him, I can't hear him. Well, that's really strange. Yeah, I could not hear him at all on my. Yeah, so if we can't, I mean, that's interesting because you said you could hear him, but if I can't hear him, then I obviously can't talk to him that way. So let's try to figure it out. 1 second. Brian, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's really strange. Y'all said y'all could hear him. I couldn't hear him at all.
I can hear you, and vice versa. Can you see me?
Y'all can hear him. I can't hear him. I'm getting nothing from mine. Just give me a second. Hold on. I know there's tons of people in here. I know this is really bad situations, but it sort of is what it is. So give me a second. I've never had that happen before where I've actually had a hard time. Brian, can I hear you now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
There we go. All right, we got Brian. He's
We made
here.
it happen.
Okay, so what happens, and this is interesting. I guess this is for my pro tip. When I go to this screen, it's switching my audio from my AirPods to the microphone that I'm using. So it was using audio there from the microphone. So Brian, did you go to the game for a little while tonight?
I did. I went for a half. I went and sat with my mother and my two aunts and my soon-to-be wife, fiance, and hung out for a bit. Great atmosphere. Talk about it like a SEC-like atmosphere. I thought the crowd and everything was terrific. And it felt like an SEC game in early September, to be completely honest.
Students, tons of students there. They were there really early again. They've been there for both games. And yeah, like as you said, the entire crowd really filled in. I think I stayed for the first half, somewhere around there, and that's the most full, like, mid to late first quarter that I can remember maybe since, the big time A&M win even 2 years ago. I mean, it was other than the Georgia Tech sections that you knew would be whatever. I mean, it was a really big, it was an excellent fan turnout tonight, I thought, for Ole Miss.
Completely agree. If Kiffin was going to criticize the fan turnout, it would have to be the fact that the nerds did not fill up their away section. That would be the only criticism there is. The only unfilled section was the Georgia Tech people. So I thought it was a great crowd. I thought people were invested, and I thought it was a pretty good football game for it turning out to be 24 points or 18 points or whatever the hell it ended up being.
You do this thing where you typically do a ton of offensive line watching. You're showing me reserves and guys going in and all this stuff. And they started McGee and Kern again. It was the same five as last time. But overall, what did you sort of see from a rotation standpoint there up front? And then just in general, I mean, they obviously were improved, but what was your main takeaway up front for Ole Miss?
Yeah, I thought they were pretty much improved overall. And like a couple years ago when I first started doing the podcast with Weldon, he was like, look at the offensive line. You'll be able to tell a lot about the offense in general because of that. And so I've always just kind of made a note of like each drive, who comes out the offensive line. Well, for the first 3 years of the Kiffin era, really wasn't anything to report. It was the same five guys every time. And for the most part, with Kern and McGee, it was the same thing most every time, but it seemed like for a drive or two per half that they would put in Jaden Williams and then they would put in Eli Acker. And I don't know if that means anything. I don't know if that's any significance at all, but it was like they had a starting offensive line, but on the left side, they would sub in those two guys, which only seems to be the positions of question for like a drive per half. And I'd have to go back and watch again tomorrow to see if it made any difference or if there's actually anything there. Maybe they're just trying to keep people happy. But I do think they have their starting offensive line. It's just fascinating to me that, you get 3-4 drives into a game and they will sub in their entire left side and sub them out for a drive and then go back to the starters again. I don't know what's up there, but it was just something I noticed. I lost you for a second. What'd you say?
What other games did you watch today?
Watched a lot of LSU, Mississippi State. Holy cow, Mississippi State looks real bad. I take pleasure sometimes in reading Mississippi State message boards. It's just a guilty hobby of mine. It's like crack. I still have a 247 staff account. I hope I'm not outing myself there so I can access all the other Mississippi State 247's account. There are a lot of angry posters saying that it reminded them of the Crim era. I got to be completely honest. I don't think that's a total exaggeration. I don't think Mississippi State will descend into the Crim era. But, man, offensively, you watched the same thing I did. It was really, really bad.
No, I talked about that with Jeffrey. They're horrid, and it doesn't fit scheme. It doesn't fit anything that they're doing right now in so many different ways. I mean, the West is such a weird division. I don't know how to handicap everything because even look at what I get. Auburn won that game at Cal. Cal was getting blitzed today by Idaho. I don't know what the final score was, but at one point that was 17-0. I mean, everybody in this division has all sorts of issues, but from a systemic issue standpoint, I'm not sure anybody has more systemic issues than Mississippi State. I mean, and look, it's that fan base that has like this. I know it hit every fan base and every message board and all that kind of stuff, but they want to just throw Will Rogers out to pasture right now. They want to be done with him, and they're blaming the quarterback instead of blaming the coach that does nothing to fit his actual skill set. It's the damnedest thing I've ever seen.
Oh, it's amazing. So when Mike Leach took over, remember, it was not a huge transition. They didn't need different offensive linemen to run the air raid, and they didn't need a different quarterback. Well, then when they sucked in 2020, I guess part of it got wiped away by COVID. That was a big transition. Now, when they go back to Barbay and whomever, it wasn't supposed to be a big transition. Remember, they were all on brand. They all got their talking points. It was not supposed to be a transition out of the air raid. Well, guess what? Probably a pretty big transition out of the air raid. And I don't know what they do. They clearly refuse to play Mike Wright. That Parsons kid, they don't seem to believe in because everyone I talked to at Mississippi State seems to be of the belief that the replacement for Will Rogers is not on campus yet. So what do? I mean, in that offense, the way they want to try to run it, why would you not just play Mike Wright and just see what happens? Because, again, I don't know a ton about Will Rogers' backstory, but, man, outside of an air raid offense, that kid struggles to complete passes 9 to 10 yards through the air. I'm not even talking about 9 to 10 yards down the field. Why would you not just go with the kid that gives you a little bit of mobility? They refuse to do it. I don't know what they do. It's a year where they have 8 home games. Again, I don't want to overreact in September, but can you see them beating any SEC opponent they have on their schedule with the way they look today and last week, by the way, by getting very lucky to beat Arizona?
I'm having a hard time going overly hyperbolic on anybody in the SEC after what happened today. When you've got Carolina up on Georgia at one point, you've got Alabama playing with its food completely there against South Florida. I mean, BYU beats Arkansas. Like, it's just, this league is one of these deals where it's matchup and it's emotion and it's so week to week, and it's just taking care of your own business and making sure that whatever your issue is, because everybody got issues, everybody got something, that it's not at the one or two most critical spots that's going to kill you relative to the team you're playing that single week. It's why I like Ole Miss and LSU right now, is that they have quarterback play, Jaden Daniels and Jackson Dart, and then they showed some resilience about them, because I get State sucked today, but I give LSU some credit. They came back after that loss 2 weeks ago to Florida State. They played really sound football. They did a lot of really, really good stuff. You just look and see kind of, not culture or anything. I don't want to use too many buzzwords, but what you are seeing is just the ability for teams to sort of withstand. Because Ole Miss 2 weeks in a row, I think this is critical and maybe one of the main takeaways from this game, is that, and I said this with Jeffrey for a second, but I'll elaborate a little more. Tulane was a one-possession game in the fourth quarter. Georgia Tech, it got cut to 7 with 10 minutes to go. They scored twice. It's right there. In both times, Ole Miss has answered the bell. Dart's made big plays. They've done so many things that's taking them out of the conversation that is happening to all these other SEC West teams. All these other SEC West teams are getting into rock fights, and they either lose or they struggle or they can't put teams away, and they just do stuff. Because, look, I get Florida State is better than Georgia Tech or Tulane. I'm not doing that thing where I act like it's exactly the same. But LSU and Florida State were tied at 17 at the half. And then Florida State ran them out of the building and LSU quit. So if you're Ole Miss, what looks really good for you right now is the resolve they have. I mean, it looks like Lane was 100% right when he talked about them handling adversity in this season compared to last season and what this looks like from a culture standpoint. And look, they got to get healthier. They do. There's no doubt Ole Miss needs more weapons before Tuscaloosa next week. But at the same time, in a vacuum, not relative pound for pound, but just in general, they've been the most resilient team from simply not getting into these situations. Instead, they're covering games, they're blowing teams out, and they're finding ways to separate instead of getting into their Cheerios, falling back, and then getting into some 5-minute game they have to go win at that point.
I think that's incredibly well said. And if you look at the SEC, I mean, you talk about the West Division, it's really across the SEC. Who has impressed you? I would say the answer is probably nobody. And the reason that I think the expectations for this Ole Miss team for me has changed through 3 weeks has had little to do with how Ole Miss has played, other than that resiliency aspect, which you outlined very well. But it's everyone around them. Does LSU scare you? Does Alabama really scare you? It seems as wide open of a conference. And I feel like for the last, decade and a half or 2 decades plus, we've gotten used to, okay, Alabama's going to be Alabama. Georgia kind of came on and they became the new Alabama. And it's like, okay, well, what happens behind them? It seems more wide open than it's ever been. And that's the reason I would think my expectations have changed for this Ole Miss team more so than anything they've done. Is just the sheer fact of, is anyone around them actually any good? I'm not saying Ole Miss will beat Alabama next weekend, but man, would it stun me? No, not in the slightest. And then you get LSU the next week at home. It seems more gettable than at any point in the time that I've been closely following SEC football at all. And that's what's crazy to me. And I'll give you a little bit of insight. I ran into the guy that runs Skybox Sports Picks. Sign up now. Who is Skybox Sports Picks? The world's greatest handicapping service. I ran into our guy today who will remain nameless. And I said, hey, what are kind of your early metrics saying about Ole Miss, Alabama? And he says, Alabama 8.5-point favorite. And I was like, man, really? Like, what would you guess that line was tomorrow? I know you're big on the early lines. What would you guess the line is tomorrow after this South Florida game? Granted, I talked to him to this before the South Florida Alabama game really got going. What would you guess the line is? I lost you for a second. Can you hear me?
My bad. Yeah, I think we had talked to Jeffrey about this, and it was at 8 or 8.5 in our conversations, because you just sort of set it there, and then you see where it goes. You know what I mean? Like, you let the money run it one way or the other, but it's like a good standard. Look, Alabama's at home. They've got name value. You convince yourself that still nationally teams bet on Alabama simply because Lane gets really geeked up this way and what that looks like. So I think in some ways it's a deal of you just put it there, and then you can branch off depending on what's up at that point.
So if you're determining who's the favorite in the SEC or the SEC West, again, I'm not saying Ole Miss is the favorite or should be considered in that. In the overarching factor, quarterback, and if you're Ole Miss in a wide open league that seems to have quarterback issues and traditional blue blood powers, they're 1 or 2. Whether you want to take Jackson Dart or Jaden Daniels, like, wouldn't you take him 1 or 2? And you pointed that out last week when you filled in for Weldon. For Ole Miss's flaws, they got a quarterback, and it seems like a lot of other places don't.
What do you make of Ole Miss's defense? They made adjustments after halftime. That I thought they played pretty well in the secondary for the most part. Look, they still have some issues at linebacker, but it's something you don't necessarily have not seen from an Ole Miss defense consistently year over year. Now, they did it a little bit in 21, but when Haynes King couldn't throw downfield and they had a hard time, that Ole Miss front actually pinned their ears back, played really sound football for like a quarter there. And look, I get I'm picking one small sample size, but at the same time, I thought, hey, there is a progress there a little bit. I mean, you don't look at the overall stats. The first half's still kind of ugly. You can't let Georgia Tech do a 12-play drive, a 13-play drive, and then a 17-play drive. You got to get off the field. That's got to get better at times. But from an adjustment standpoint, that front four and then sort of the players you need to make plays. DeAndre Prince was really active again tonight. I thought he played really well. Trade Washington had a huge coverage bust, but otherwise he was very sound in the tackling game. He did a lot of good things. They're getting better. They're accepting coaching. I mean, I think there are things about that defense because it was never supposed to be a top 20, top 15 defense. It was supposed to be a defense that improved and did some things and situationally made plays. And they've done a really nice job about that. I mean, they've been in the right place. You know, their lack of speed in the middle of the field has kind of gotten them at times from a tackling standpoint. But for the most part, I feel like they are running correct assignments, and they are at least getting better week over week over week relative to the opponent. I mean, there's a part where that's all you can really ask at that point.
I thought the biggest takeaway defensively this week was the fact that it seemed like they could generate a consistent pass rush. Not only with Cedric Johnson, they seemed to have some guys on other sides, and they moved Cedric Johnson around. And around him had a pretty consistent pass rush. This was a very hard game to evaluate defensively. I'll be very interested to go back and watch it tomorrow. There was a point in this game, if I'm not mistaken, that I think Georgia Tech had 390 yards of offense, only averaged 4 yards of play, and had 3 points on the board. How, in God's name, how could you make that make any sense? Like, it was just a very weird game in that aspect, and it probably speaks to the fact that, as you mentioned, like, getting them off the field, Ole Miss struggled on third down, particularly early in the game, but it was a very bend, don't break-ish effort, and I thought in the areas that I was questioning Ole Miss, they proved to be pretty sturdy in those, whether it's pass rush or the fact that they're on their assignments. You know, we talked about last week that it was a very assignment-driven game. Maybe that's why Centurion Perkins didn't play as much. Man, he really popped. I don't know how many snaps he played, but there was a point early in that game where he seemingly just kind of teleported around a left tackle and then just jumped and got a guy behind the line of scrimmage. They have some guys. I think they have enough of it. I'm curious about their depth. But they're top-end guys. I really do think fully healthy, they could be a very competitive defense that gives them enough to accomplish the goals they want to accomplish. I lost you again. Are you muting yourself? Do you not want me to talk to you? What's going on here?
Well, see, what's happening is I've got feedback going, so I have to mute myself when you're talking. Look, I'm doing stuff on the fly. Somebody said Chase doesn't operate great past 9 p.m. There's probably some truth to that, but you know what? We're engineering this thing. We're making it happen. We're getting a show in. My blood pressure might be up, but I'm actually proud of my effort tonight, guys. I'm actually proud that we're getting through this. We're fixing problems. I mean, you learn a lot just trying to produce and host and do everything. I give McCready credit. He's figured this thing out a little better than I am. He's had a little more practice, but he's got it going all right. What I was saying is that Pete had a couple plays to really be able to yell at him with, because those two busted coverages could have been huge problems. I mean, they had the 52-yard catch or whatever it was to Singleton down the middle of the field that led to the touchdown when Tech got a little momentum. And then there was also the play right after that the drive right after that where they left him wide open in the end zone for the touchdown on fourth down. So he gets plenty to yell at. It's right there whenever you need to go to it. I mean, while it was better, it definitely wasn't perfect as well. It looks like Neil is back from the press conference. I'm going to jump into him. Brian, appreciate it. Let's do it again next week, bud.
Absolutely. Y'all have a good night. I will commend your effort. Your blood pressure does look up, but I mean, if you're a big famous author back there with your book cover in the background, you're
catching a stray there from Rippy on his way out. Appreciate it, bud. We'll talk soon.
Good to see you. I'll talk to you next week.
Let's see. Let's try to get Neil in now. 1 second. Mr. McCready, how are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly fine. I think we're good to go. We have not seen anything. We're watching Colorado State give Colorado all they want up here. We're talking about some of Ole Miss's things. What did Lane say? What was the Kiffin message tonight?
Well, there's no sarcasm at all from him tonight at all. Which is shocking. I'm kidding. It's the same old thing. I mean, I put it up in quick hits on the side. Most of the talk was about this game. I tried to turn the page at one point to Alabama, and he really didn't take that bait just yet. So, I mean, they've got a lot of injuries, a lot of things to overcome. Defense has to tackle better. They've got to get off the field on third down, but they're 3-0. That's the best they can be after 3 games.
Did they give any? I mean, is there any semblance of injuries or what anything looks like at all? I'm sure it's a no, but I'm going to at least ask. Like, it's that deal where you're the prosecuting attorney and you have a chance to maybe get a guy to say something. You go, you know what? He's going to plead the fifth, but we're still going to spend the 8 seconds to ask the question. So just ask.
The only thing close to that was that whatever it was that was bothering Quinshawn, he gutted through it and played some. That was the extent of it. He wouldn't even specify that it was ribs, even though we all know it was ribs.
Fair
or
enough.
that Caden Prescorn's got a foot because he's wearing a boot. I mean, I'm going to guess it's not a wrist injury.
So, you and I didn't discuss this because I had left after halftime, but I've kind of talked about this with Jeffrey and Brian. Ole Miss's ability to make some adjustments after halftime. They give up these 3 huge drives to Georgia Tech in the first half, and I told Jeffrey, I think Dejon Anthony's breakup in the end zone was the play of the game because that thing gets completely different if he doesn't knock that ball out on 4th down and doesn't let Ole Miss take a cushion into the half and kind of reset. But the defense getting off the field those first 2 possessions of the second half and then turning those into touchdowns, this is sort of a hypothesis that I have going into the week, and this is sort of setting up all of our coverage for the week of podcast, is if you like Ole Miss's chances that they get any healthy, what's maybe the thing they've done better than any other SEC team, SEC West team at least, is handle their adversity and separate and not get into these rock fights at the very end of games. That's 2 weeks in a row that Ole Miss has been in games that very easily could have gone the other way. They could have lost. They could have gotten into overtime situations. They could have done all these different things, and instead they found a way to make a stop or two, put a drive or two together, and separate. You look around, Arkansas, Alabama, other teams aren't doing this. So Kiffin really is getting even more of that proof of concept that maybe he's right about the chemistry and the adversity and all that stuff that potentially happens.
Yeah, it could be. You're right. That's 2 weeks in a row that it could have gotten kind of squirrely, and it didn't. And 24-17, even after Georgia Tech came back with a couple of touchdowns. And made it a 1-score game to get the field goal and then to get a stop and then to add on and make a couple of big plays. The passing game really had not been there, and suddenly they hit a couple of big plays. I mean, there is a level of resilience and sort of perseverance with this team that I'm not sure that we saw last season. Again, I wrote this in my column. I mean, these have been pop quizzes that we knew were coming, pop quizzes that weren't big parts of the grade, that you knew you were going to pass them. There was never a point tonight that I thought, they could lose to Georgia Tech. It never crossed my mind. But they have answered the bell in those situations, and that Tulane game could have gotten weird, and the game tonight could have gotten weird. And they didn't let it get weird. Instead, they kind of turned both of them into what looked like blowouts. And so we're about to find out what this team is, though, because, we've talked about this for months, it seems like, and here we are.
Not just results-based, but the way it looked. Ulysses Bentley looked like an SEC back tonight. Had 6 carries. He had 61 yards. I thought he had some burst to him there on a couple of those early runs with Judkins banged up, whatever he's dealing with. And with Ole Miss, we don't know what the pass catcher situation is going to be like. We don't know if Franklin's going to play next week. We don't know what Prescorn's going to look like. All these different things. Trigg did nothing tonight. They're going to at least need some running backs here. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with you. I'll be the cold water guy about the receivers. Franklin hasn't played a snap. To expect that he's just going to go into Tuscaloosa against an Alabama defense. We keep talking about Alabama's offense. Yeah, it's pretty rough, but their defense is pretty good. He's going to go in against that defense and go 50 snaps. To me, that's unrealistic. And frankly, the same holds for Caden Prescorn. I don't think that's a realistic ask. I'm not saying it won't happen, but if you're counting on Trey Harris and Caden Prescorn and Zachary Franklin against Alabama, we have different life views. I'm not saying yours is not better than mine, but I think mine might be more realistic than yours. So yeah, they have to run the football. They need to get Quinshawn going, but it was a big deal for them to get production out of Bentley today. But look, the reason, in my opinion, that this team is 3-0 and not 2-1 or even 1-2, or the reason that there's optimism heading to Tuscaloosa is because they're getting elite play out of their quarterback. He's not making mistakes. He's taking what's given to him. He admitted tonight that he probably should slide, but he keeps forgetting to slide. It's probably something he's got to work on. I mean, he just can't keep taking hit after hit after hit after hit. But he plays with a level of toughness that, that they haven't had that. Not knocking previous quarterbacks, but this guy's just got toughness in spades, and he makes big throws, and he doesn't make mistakes. I know he's done one pick all year, and it was on a play where the receiver fell. He's just been really good. You can tell that he commands the huddle, he commands the team. Guys respect him. They want to play hard for him. They want to impress him. I mean, I think through 3 games, it's not even a debate about who the MVP of this team is. It's Jackson Dart. He's been amazing. He was really good tonight. I mean, he doesn't have his weapons. He goes into the game not knowing, what they'll be able to get out of Quinshawn, and their offensive line's clearly struggling some, and you get the holding calls and stuff like that. And he just perseveres and makes play after play after play. And he's the reason, in my opinion, that when they go to Tuscaloosa on Saturday, they've got more than a puncher's chance.
Well, you go into a game where you have not just the better quarterback, but the better quarterback in spades to whatever the hell Alabama is going to do at this point at that position. What do you expect? I mean, what's your guess on what they do at that position?
My guess is they go back to Milroe, but I was watching some of Nick Saban's post-game press conference, and he obviously wanted to get a look at Buckner. He wanted to get a look at Simpson, and he was disappointed based on what he said, that in Milroe's preparation this week and Milroe's attitude this week after finding out he wasn't going to start against South Florida. So, I mean, I thought Saban looked kind of frustrated with that. I mean, he's never going to come out and say those words that, hey, I'm frustrated, but I thought he looked frustrated with just the lack of that coming together. Look, they made a mistake. I mean, there were guys in the portal that they wanted to go get, or they thought they might be able to get. They weren't able to get it done, whether they couldn't put the right package together or they got beat out or whatever happened. But they are a quarterback short. And when you watch them play, and I watched a good bit of their game today, it exposes everything in the same way that if Ole Miss just had an adequate quarterback right now, this would be panic time. The fact that they haven't, what I think is becoming an elite quarterback, is what gives them a chance to overcome all of that. Alabama does not have an elite quarterback. They've got 3 guys, and one can run the ball and can't do other things. You've got one that does not make good decisions yet, and you've got another one that's just, he's not mobile enough to operate their offense, and he doesn't throw the ball particularly well. I mean, I think they're in trouble at the quarterback position. I wrote this tonight. I mean, I think you can make the argument that they're the 4th best team in the West. I mean, I think you can argue legitimately that LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M are all better than them. And offensively, Arkansas is better than them.
Yeah, today, the answer is State, but Arkansas and State both going into a lot of soul searching, or can Arkansas go, hey, Rocket didn't play and blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, that was a pretty ugly game for most of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't Sanders. They didn't get production from their defense. That was the kind of – look, they got a really rough stretch coming up. We'll talk about it during the week. But that was the kind of loss that can set some things in motion. In much the same way that the win for Missouri today is the kind of win that can set some things in motion. You might have seen 2 programs do this today. Big win from Missouri. That's a big loss for Arkansas. They got, what do they have left? They have LSU now, then A&M, then Ole Miss, then Alabama, or something along those lines. I mean, you could look up and be 2-5, and suddenly you're talking about firing coaches, and there's some people that would make sense there. So that's probably something to watch. That was a big loss for them tonight. It wasn't offense, it was defense.
You thought LSU looked like themselves today, right?
I did. I thought they looked terrific. I don't – anybody that tries to spin that, I mean, No, I thought they looked great. I mean, Daniels was fantastic, and they couldn't guard Neighbors. They were productive in their running game. I thought they looked pretty good up front most of the time. And then I thought defensively they looked like they were starting to kind of figure some things out. They've got some dudes on that defensive side of the ball now. And no, I thought LSU looked like a playoff caliber team today. Now, some of that is State is trying to force a square peg into a round hole, and they're just hitting it and hitting it and hitting it. But LSU looked the part.
Let's say more about Florida or Tennessee today.
Florida, I mean, they lost to Utah, and everybody was like, "Oh, they're done. Fire the coach." He's recruiting at a really high level. They played really hard for him tonight, and they blew Tennessee out. Tennessee was the team that lost its composure, not Florida.
Yeah, Tennessee looked
really
bad. Yeah, most of the game.
Yeah, that was a bad loss for them. And not just losing the game, but the way you lose it and the way you lose your cool, and you look like a bunch of thugs at the end of it. That's bad for them. I thought for Florida that was a game you can build on.
Yeah, Florida. We've buried Billy Napier too soon, for sure. Not us, just college football in general. There's no doubt about that. I mean, look, I mean, I'm a little wounded this week, okay? Every one of my hot takes basically looks like the dumbest things that could have possibly been said in college football. I mean, I had Missouri worse than Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has lost to UNLV tonight in a barn burner against the running Rebels there. Vandy's destined for 0-8 in the SEC. They're not going to win an SEC game. They can't beat any of these teams whatsoever. Tennessee didn't look ready for prime time. I mean, it looked, Heupel has built a really good program in a lot of ways, but he doesn't seem to have a lot of leaders on this team. Hendon Hooker was a big deal with him gone. I mean, you can't just you saw Milton and go, hey, he can throw the ball down the field and he can do all this, but it doesn't translate 100% on everything else that Hendon Hooker was able to do. This SEC, I think Georgia loses a game this year. I don't think they go 12-0. Their offense is just not good. It's just not. They don't do enough. They're going to get into a bunch of rock fights, and you lose a rock fight at some point if you just get into 12 of them and play those games.
I just don't know who in the regular season can beat them.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is even looking at it, it still looks like the most likely contenders are Ole Miss or Tennessee, right?
Yeah,
I mean, if you have to pick someone, who else?
I almost would pick Missouri or Kentucky over Tennessee.
If Kentucky has the right day, if Missouri has the right day, because look, Missouri almost did it last year, so you can't say they can't do it.
That was a big win for them today. That really was. It stuck out to me. That was gutty. The quarterback was hurt, played through it. I mean, they overcame the stupid clock management. The kid makes a 61-yarder. I mean, that's the kind of cathartic thing that you could see building.
It's the part where, and look, I took it. I should have. I was making fun of Missouri in real time before they hit the 61-yard kick, so it's fine. I'll eat it. I mean, basically everything about the fan base came at me except for Drew Lock's sister. I didn't have her coming at me anymore. It looks like she's moved on to whatever.
It was
Mr. Locke
quite the take on your part.
Yeah, it was, but I'm still right. Drinkwitz is the worst game management coach in the SEC. He was completely bailed out. And that's why Missouri, it's like they got this huge win and this cathartic thing, and at the same time you go, God, we still made the dumbest coaching decision in the SEC to date this season. What are we? You know what I mean? Like, there's just this thing that kind of sits there because they're winnable games for Missouri. I mean, if they just play decent, sound football, Kentucky, Devin Leary played really well tonight, and they were awful otherwise. They gave him no help. The Wildcats were abysmal outside of Devin Leary. They couldn't protect him. It's hard to see almost anybody in this league going 10-2 right now. It looks like we just got a big hodgepodge of, depending on the week, specific matchups, emotions, and just who decides to want to play football that day.
Well, that's why I'm really interested to see what Ole Miss does with Alabama. I mean, if Ole Miss is going to be the team that people think it's going to be, it starts Saturday. They beat Alabama, because everything we've always said all summer long still holds true. If they lose to Alabama, it's a real missed opportunity, and then you have your hands full a week later. And all of a sudden you could have 2 losses, and now you're like, well, never mind. But you beat Alabama. This LSU Ole Miss game here is it's monumental.
I've asked
And then
Brian
the other
this,
team,
yeah.
and then the other team that we're counting out, that's a mistake because they have figured it out on offense is A&M.
I know it was ULM, but A&M looked cohesive today. They played well. They did some good things. What's the line next week? I've asked Jeffrey and Brian this. We actually kind of came to a consensus.
Alabama minus 5.5.
We believe it's going to be higher than that for them to set it and then let it come down or up depending on situations. I think Brian and Jeffrey and I all kind of think it's going to be around 8.
Oh God, give me that action.
You want that?
Yeah. I mean,
what Dart say tonight?
all the right stuff. He's just a super confident guy right now. Likes his team. I mean, here's the thing about Ole Miss, right? Is can they play well enough on the offensive front to stay ahead of the chains, to use the tempo, to score some points, to put the pressure on Alabama's offense? That's the question. To me, it's all about up front. And there were times today where I just thought, God, the offensive line is just not good. And I think if you're sitting in Bryant Denny on Saturday saying, man, this offensive line's not good, I don't think it's going to go well. Now, if they put it together and score some points and make Alabama chase points a little bit, that's not who they are. I mean, they were in trouble today. It was 3-3, third quarter? 3 points against South Florida. They were a 33-point favorite. So I think that's the key. And to me, this is just a monumentally big game for Ole Miss. I don't think there's any way around it. You win this game and all of a sudden 10-2 and a lot of stuff's on the table. You lose this game and it's probably not.
As mentioned by Grind a second ago, preseason line on this 14.5. You could have gotten Ole Miss and Alabama at 14.5 back in.
I feel really good about that right now. I'd start spending that money. I mean, I think it's a coin toss.
They're talking about the offensive line in the stream. Last thing, and we'll get out of here. They're gonna play this rotation. They're still not playing Jaden Williams a ton. I mean, it's McGee and it's Kern, and they're obviously playing. They're playing them the majority of the snaps. Pettis has had a lot of mistakes over there on that tackle spot. It's been pretty rough. You just now saw it, didn't you? Yeah, you're behind.
Sorry.
We have some Cubs stuff in real time as this is playing out. Yeah, I was catching it in the stream right before that happened. What are the standings right now?
I think Arizona pulled within a half game just then.
Okay, for the second wild card.
Yeah, and then I think it's real close after that. The Cubs are in danger of falling out of the whole thing.
What I was going to ask is, they need a rotation, right? In offensive line, they don't have 5 guys. I mean, like it's just. I mean, at some point, this is going to pop you.
Yeah, I mean, they're rotating guys because they're searching for something. They're not getting consistent play at left tackle. They're not getting consistent play at right tackle. He's been bad. 61. I mean, he made everybody upset tonight. He had a couple of holding calls that derailed drives. I don't think center guard, they're getting – I thought they've improved a little. They need to get better there if they're going to hold up against LSU. If they're going to hold up against Alabama defensively, they're going to have to get better up front. To me, that's the whole story this week is, can you get anybody back from a weapon standpoint? But realistically, you're not. We already covered this ground. You're not going to really get those guys back realistically and get a lot out of them. So you just got to play better up front. You have to be clean. You have to. But now, Ole Miss defensively today gave up 477 yards. They gave up some long drives. We talked about how the first half, I think Tech had 40 plays for 200 and something yards, right at 200 yards. had a field goal blocked, had to settle for a field goal, went for it on 4th down in the end zone, didn't get it. I mean, had long drives, 13 play drives, 11 play drives. I mean, I think you've got to get – I don't think you can let Alabama do that next week. But I think Georgia Tech's probably better offensively than Alabama is.
Yeah, that's where I was going to finish. Last thing, how good is Georgia Tech in your opinion? Because that's the problem. I mean, we have no really idea of how to compare these SEC West teams because even who they're playing looks just all over the place right now. I mean, Auburn is undefeated, but obviously Cal barely scored points and all that crap, and they were losing to Idaho at one point today. And whatever.
I mean, I think they're okay. Well coached. You could tell they were well coached. Mm-hmm. They played hard. I thought the quarterback played pretty well, really. Thought he did some good things. He made them certainly more serviceable offensively. They got after Ole Miss defensively. They just couldn't hold up at the end. But they had some period there where they had the Ole Miss offense stifled a little bit. I thought they were a good team. I mean, Georgia Tech and Tulane, if they played each other, it'd probably be a pretty competitive game.
Yeah, Tulane knocking off Southern Miss 21-7, I think, today in Hattiesburg,
right, yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, pretty handled it. Congratulations to Kane Womack. They hammer Oklahoma State today in Stillwater. Just talking about some people we talked to and discussed and whatnot. So you'll have a happy camper on McCready and Siskey later in the week, guys.
Who won that Troy James Madison game, by the way?
I don't know. Let's find out real quick. I
don't
have an answer to that.
Really close fourth quarter.
Oh, really?
I think James Madison was up 2.
They won 16-14.
Okay.
Yeah, James Madison 16-14 on that one. So,
yeah.
All right, get out of there. We'll talk on Monday, obviously. McCready there joining us to tonight from the press box at Vaught Hemingway Stadium. Again, Ole Miss knocking off Georgia Tech 43 to 28. 23. I guess it ended up covering of all things, not just winning, but Ole Miss covering tonight there in Oxford. That's what, as everybody says, good teams win, great teams cover. Ole Miss has really found a way to do that the last couple of weeks. And remember, all post-game shows brought to you by Dead Soxy, the new additions to the Ole Miss collection. Be the first to grab some of the new styles, such as the Sip, Hottie Toddy, Ole Miss Script, Sharks, and more. That's deadsoxy.com. And then you can select the new licensed designs there with Dead Soxy. Again, 25% off with Rebel Grove and Dead Soxy on that one. So we will wrap it there. We got a full week of podcasts coming up for you. Really appreciate everybody on the stream, your patience. I know I had a couple mistakes tonight, so I apologize for that. I really do. I hate when that happens. We're going to get better. We got LSU in 2 weeks back at home. Got Alabama next week. Got some big post-game shows coming. So we will we'll improve. Just keep getting better for you guys. And as always, the 4%ers, thanks to Stanton and Brent. I saw those 2 super chats out there. Really appreciate you guys as well. So fun night. Ole Miss again, 48-23 over Georgia Tech. Again, full range of shows, podcasts, coverage at rebelgrove.com. Love each and every one of you. And we will talk to you again very soon.